The first thing you should know is that my wife never goes looking for trouble. She's the sort of woman who would rather spend a Saturday morning planting tomatoes and roses than fussing about who parked where or which way the garbage bins are facing. But trouble has a way of finding her, especially when it comes wrapped in the shape of one particular woman from our neighborhood association. Folks around here called her Karen, long before the internet made that a punchline, and she wears the title like a badge. When we first moved into that cul-de-sac, I told myself to keep my head down and not get tangled in HOA politics. I'd worked my whole life in logistics, retired with some gray in my beard and a little limp in my walk, and I could figure I'd earned a quiet life. My wife, Sandra, had served 30 years in the Navy and later in federal security work, though most of our neighbors never knew her full history. To them, she was just a polite woman who baked pies, waved at passing cars, and minded her own business. But beneath all that was a spine of steel. Karen, on the other hand, seemed born to meddle. If your grass grew an inch too high, she'd post a letter. If your mailbox paint chipped, she'd call a violation. She strutted around with her clipboard like she was sheriff of the suburbs. Most of us tolerated her because she thrived on the attention, and arguing only fed her fire. But the day she tried to break into my garage, everything changed. It started innocently, or so I thought. I'd been working the shed out back when I heard voices at the driveway. My wife was inside the house, folding laundry. By the time I came around the corner, Karen was fiddling with a key at the side door of the garage. She had her phone tucked between her shoulder and ear, complaining loudly to someone about non-compliance and safety hazards. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. She jumped like a thief caught red-handed, but quickly covered it with a huff. "This is official HOA business. Your garage is in violation of the code. I have a master key." "That key doesn't belong to you," I said, watching her jiggle it uselessly. "And neither does this garage." She smirked, the kind of smirk that makes you want to lock every door in your house. "Oh, you'll see. I'll call the police. You can't threaten an HOA officer." I didn't bother to argue. I simply took out my phone, clicked a photo of her hand on my lock, and went back to the shed. I knew she'd do exactly what she threatened. She always did. And sure enough, 15 minutes later, the sound of sirens curled down the street. Now, in our town, police usually show up expecting the worst. But this time, something different happened. The first officer who stepped out of the car froze mid-stride when he saw Sandra walking across the yard. She had come out with her hands on her hips, her gray-streaked hair catching the sunlight, a look on her face that could stop a hurricane. The officer, young but seasoned enough, straightened, blinked twice, and then saluted. "Commander," he said, loud enough for Karen and the neighbors who had gathered to hear. Karen's jaw fell open. She had no idea what she just walked into. Sandra, ever calm, raised a hand in acknowledgement. "At ease, Sergeant," she said. Her voice carried authority, but it wasn't harsh, just steady like stone. You could have heard a pin drop in that cul-de-sac. Even the breeze seemed to pause. I realized right then that the past my wife had neatly folded away like old uniforms was about to unfold itself for all the neighbors to see. The officer lowered his hand, still flustered. "Ma'am, well, I didn't know you lived here." "That's the idea," Sandra replied softly. She glanced at Karen, who was sputtering like a kettle about to boil. "Why are the police here?" Karen recovered enough to jab a finger toward us. They're hiding violations. Dangerous ones. This garage, this whole property." The officer cut her off. "Ma'am, I've known Commander Sanders since my first deployment. She led operations that saved more lives than you'll ever know. You called us for this." His voice hardened. "You wasted our time." Now, I'd like to say Karen backed down gracefully, but grace wasn't in her vocabulary. She stomped her foot and shrieked, "This isn't about her past. This is about rules. I'm in charge here, and you all have to follow what I say." That was the moment when the neighbors, who had been peeking from porches and hedges, began to murmur. One by one, people stepped closer, whispering to each other. For years, many had endured her harassment silently, afraid of fines or citations. But now, watching her crumble in the face of respect given freely to my wife. Something shifted. Sandra didn't raise her voice, didn't argue. She simply looked at Karen and said, "Respect isn't demanded with threats. It's earned with service." The officer nodded like he'd been waiting his whole life to hear someone say out loud. I'll admit, part of me swelled with pride. But another part felt something deeper, a reminder that the strength of a person doesn't always come from medals or titles. It comes from how they treat others when nobody is watching. That day stretched on with statements, paperwork, and eventually the HOA board arriving in a huddle of embarrassed faces. The so-called master key Karen carried was revealed to be a cheap copy she'd made years ago without authorization. Her authority, once unquestioned, crumbled like dust in the wind. By evening, she was removed from her post. Life in the neighborhood grew quieter after that. People began stopping by to chat with us, not about rules or weeds, but about family, gardening, old memories. A few even asked Sandra to share stories from her service. And she did, though never in a way that glorified herself. She spoke of teamwork, sacrifice, and the importance of watching out for one another. It wasn't about humiliating Karen, though I won't deny some folks enjoyed seeing her knocked off her pedestal. It was about something greater, remembering that communities aren't built on fear of fines or clipboards of rules. They're built on respect, kindness, and a willingness to stand up when someone crosses a line. And here's the part one hope sticks with anyone who hears this story. My wife never once bragged about her rank, never once pulled her history like a weapon. She lived quietly, believing her past was behind her. But when the moment came, it wasn't her title that silenced the chaos. It was the way she carried herself with calm dignity. Karen eventually moved away, muttering about ungrateful neighbors. I suppose she'll find another neighborhood to bother. But for us, that season taught a lesson we still carry. Never underestimate the quiet strength of the people around you. You don't know the battles they've fought, the lives they've touched, or the respect they've earned long before you ever cross their path. Even now, when I sit on the porch with Sandra as the sun dips low, I think about that officer's face when he recognized her. The surprise, the respect, the way he snapped to attention. And I realize in a world so quick to judge by appearances or petty rules, sometimes it takes one moment of truth to remind everyone what really matters. So if you ever find yourself dealing with someone like Karen, someone who thrives on control and intimidation, remember this. The louder they shout, the less power they truly have. Real power is quiet. It's steady. And when it finally reveals itself, it doesn't need to explain. It just stands there unshakable like my wife did that day.